Okay, so the video got cut off. Sorry guys. There's a dog barking at me. But it's so cute. It's so cute. Good morning. Um, yeah, so the video cut off when I was looking at the time on my phone. So I'm going to start back I'm going to continue to verse 7. Okay? To continue to identify love incorrectly is to continue to live in hell. As much as highs and lows of intense feeling are sought by some to be avoided, it is in the in-between of passionless living that hell is solidified and becomes quite real. You can label joy heaven and pain hell and seek the middle ground for your reality thinking there are more. Let me start back from the beginning of that sentence. You can label joy heaven and pain hell and seek the middle ground for your reality thinking there are more than these two choices. Oh, that's what the mind thinks, that like get a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of joy, a little bit of sorrow, a little bit of pain. That's what life is like, right? Like I think that's what Jesus is saying. Like that's our thinking in our mind. A life of little joy and little pain is seen as a successful life. For a life of joy is seen as nothing more than a daydream. A life of pain, a nightmare, right? Because often it's like, yeah, I would love to have a peaceful and easeful and joyous life, but that just feels so like it doesn't feel tangible, right? It doesn't feel like I can get there. So it's seen as something that's kind of like so far off that we can't even like imagine that. Like that's what the mind thinks. That's what the mind thinks. That's what the stories that the mind plays in our mind, that like I could never be, or that's just a dream, like that's just a fantasy, right? And it's like, no, it's not true, right? It's like it's doubt. It's the doubt within us, and looking at from a place of like in our heart, like where is that coming from? Where is that doubt coming from? Where is like these stories coming from? A life of little joy and little pain is seen as a successful life. For a life of joy is seen as nothing more than a daydream. A life of pain, a nightmare, right? And there's this confusion of who we think we are and who we are in truth. It hurts. So cute. Okay, let's continue. Into this confusion of love's reality, you add the contents of your history, the learned facts, and the assumed theories of your existence. Although your purpose here remains obscure, you identify some things you call progress and others that you call evolution. And you hope you have some minuscule role to play in advancing the status of humankind. Again, that this is how our stories that our mind plays in our head. I think it's gonna rain soon. Yeah. Okay. It's okay. Yeah, I like hear it. I hear the rain coming. Okay, I'm gonna read maybe 3. I'm gonna read up to verse 12, and then we'll stop there. Okay. So, in this confusion of love's reality, you add the contents of your history, the learned facts, and the assumed theories of your existence. Although your purpose here remains obscure, you identify, You identify some things you call progress and others that you call evolution, and you hope you have some minuscule role to play in advancing the status of humankind. This is the most you have any hope of doing, and few of you believe you will succeed. Others refuse to think of life in terms of purpose and thereby condone themselves to purposeless lives. convince one person among billions makes no difference, and it is of no consequence. Still, others put on their blinders to the world and seek only to make their corner of it more safe and secure. Like, yeah, the mind is like, yeah, I'm only gonna do this. I'm only gonna stay here in my home and change things where I am because I can't, what can, it's like, what can little, like, yeah, yeah, it's like, do you guys ever have those thoughts of like, yeah, I'm only one person. I can't change the whole world. Like, those type of thoughts. That's what's like coming to mind. That like, yeah, I'm only gonna focus here in like my environment and what I can directly do, and continue my job and yeah, I think that's what I'm getting from that verse. Some shift from one option to the next, giving up on one and hoping that the other will bring them some peace. To think that these are the only options available to creatures of a loving God is insane. Yet you believe that to think the opposite is true insanity, given even your limited view of who you are. Could this really be true? Right, it's like, feel into that, right? It's like if what Yeshua is telling us and what we know, like if we really like sit with it, it's like to have those two options, and to know also that we are loved, and to know that there's something more than this what we've created. It's like, think about that, like, are those the only options that we have? Could that really be true? The insanity of we're on verse 9. I often just keep going, but I want to make sure that you all have the verse that we're on, because I often stop and talk. Verse 9, the insanity of your thought process and the world you perceive must be made known to you before you are willing to give it up. You do know this, and yet you constantly forget. This forgetting is the work of your ego. Your true self does not want to forget, and cannot for even the tiniest fraction of a second. It is precisely the inability of your true self to forget that gives you hope of learning to recognize love, and what the recognition of ending the insanity you now perceive. Your real self is the Christ in you. How could it be anything but love, or see with eyes other than those of love? Would you expect any decent human being to look on a loveless world, on misery and despair, and not be moved? Think not that those who seem to add to the world's misery are any exception. There is not a soul that walks this earth that does not weep at what it sees. Yet the Christ in you does not weep, for the Christ in you sees with eyes of love. The difference is the eyes of love see not the misery or despair. They are not there. They are not there. This is the miracle. The miracle is true seeing. Think not that love can look on misery and see love there. Love looks not on misery at all. Right. Because, right, like Yeshua just said, that the miracle is that the Christ doesn't really the Christ is love. This spirit within us is love. And so love cannot look on misery, cannot look on despair. So compassion is not what you have made it. The Bible instructs you to be compassionate as God is compassionate. You have defined it unlike the compassion of God. Let me read that again. Compassion is not what you have made it. So it's not what we have made it in regards to our definition that we've created through belief of separation, through the belief of levels, through the belief of duality, of good, bad, right, wrong, right? So compassion is not what you have made it. The Bible instructs you to be compassionate as God is compassionate. And you have defined it unlike the compassion of God. To believe God looks upon misery and responds with sympathy and concern and does not end the misery is to believe in a God who is compassionate as you are compassionate. Right, so this is like in reference to what he was talking about, I believe in verse 8, when we were talking about like the consequences of interjecting the consequences of, excuse me, right, seeing our, yeah, right, so he's breaking it down for us. Right, so to believe that God looks upon misery and responds with sympathy and concern and does not end the misery is to believe in a God of compassion as the compassion that we've created. You think you would end misery if you could, beginning with your own, and yet you could no more end misery by making it real than could God. Right, because that's also just like how powerful we are. Like once we have a belief about something, it becomes real. Right, because even if you think about how we were created, like that, it's a thought, and we were created. You think you could end misery if you could, beginning with your own, and yet you could be no more that and yet you getting like tongue twisted here, and yet you could no more end misery by making it real than could God. There is no magic here of turning misery into delight and pain into joy. These acts would indeed be magic, an illusion on top of an illusion. You have but accepted illusion as the truth, and so seek other illusions. You have but accepted illusions as the truth, and so seek other illusions to change what never was into something that never will be. It's almost like how, like, what's coming to mind of like when we have continual problems, right? When there's a continual problem or continual lack, it's like seeing illusions and replacing it with illusions. Right? And so it's like you can't find maybe a viable solution because of where your belief lies. Where am I? Verse 12. All right, this is the last verse we'll do for now until we meet again. Until you meet again. To be compassionate as God is compassionate is to see as God sees. Again, I stress to you, this is not about looking upon misery and saying to yourself, you see it not, right? Because that would be bypassing it. Like, oh, something's happening there. But like, oh no, I don't see it, you know? So Jesus is saying, like, that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm expressing here. I am not an advocate of heartlessness, but wholeheartedness. If you believe even the tiniest fraction of what is true, if you but believe you are a small part of God, no bigger than a pinprick of light in a daunting sun, you still cannot believe in the reality of misery and despair. If you do, you believe this is the state of God as well. And if this were true, what hope would there be for misery's end? What light would there be in the universe that could end the darkness? And with that, we will start again on verse 13 in the next video, maybe tomorrow. Thank you for listening, and I hope that I invite you all, you know, to sit with and breathe after this video and check in with your heart, you know, check in with yourself. Drink some water, and yes, thank you for spending your time with me today. It's the morning for me, but whatever time it is for you, thank you so much for being here with me. Okay, take care. Bye.